Have you ever felt like God showed you something? A dream, a calling, a quiet sense of who you were meant to become, and then watched your life go in completely the opposite direction? You're not where you thought you'd be by now. The gap between the promise and your reality keeps getting wider. And somewhere in the waiting, you've started to wonder if you imagined the whole thing. But here's the deeper question, and it's the one I actually want to sit with. What if the years that look like they're burying the dream are the very thing building the person who can finally carry it? What if your worst chapter isn't the end of your story, but the raw material God is quietly weaving into something that ends up saving you and a lot of other people with you? If you're stuck in that gap, behind where you hope to be, carrying a chapter you think has ruined you, this video is for you. Because there's a man in the Bible who got a dream at 17, then spent 13 years watching his life fall apart in every direction. Betrayed, sold, lied about, locked up, forgotten. And not one of those years was wasted. At the end of it, he says one of the most powerful sentences a human being can ever learn to say. We'll get there. But you have to walk the whole road with him first, because it only means something once you've felt what it cost him. This is Joseph, and his story isn't really about a coat or a dream or a happy ending. It's about what God can do with a life that gets handed nothing it asked for. Welcome to the Ancient Playbook. Ancient words, modern wisdom, real-life results. Let's get into it. Here's where it starts. Joseph is 17, he's the favorite, and his father doesn't hide it. There's a coat, an expensive one, and every time his brothers see it, they're reminded they come second. And then Joseph has these dreams. Dreams of his whole family bowing down to him. And being 17, he tells everyone about them. He's not wrong about the dreams. God really did give them to him. But he doesn't have the wisdom yet to carry what he's been shown. So the brothers' resentment finally boils over. They grab him, strip off the famous coat, and throw him into a dry pit in the ground. And then, sit with this, they sit down to eat a meal while their brother is screaming in the dark beneath them. And when a caravan of traders passes by, they sell him. Genesis 37 tells us the price, 20 pieces of silver. That's what his own brothers decided he was worth. Here's the first thing this teaches you, and it's uncomfortable. God will sometimes show you the destination long before you have the character to handle it. Joseph saw the dream at 17. He doesn't stand in front of Pharaoh until he's 30. That's 13 years between the promise and the fulfillment, and almost all of it is suffering. If God has shown you something, a calling, a glimpse of who you could become, and your life right now looks nothing like it, you are not behind. You're in the gap, and the gap is where the person gets built who can actually hold the thing. Joseph lands in Egypt, sold into the house of a powerful man named Potiphar, a slave, foreign, alone, stripped of his name, his family, his future. And here's the line the Bible drops, right in the middle of his slavery. Genesis 39, verse 2. The Lord was with Joseph, and he became a successful man. Stop on that. The Lord was with Joseph while he was a slave, not after he got free, not once his circumstances improved. Right there in the house of his captivity, God was with him. We need to hear this because most of us have quietly believed a lie, that God's presence shows up as good circumstances, that if things are going wrong, God must have left. Joseph's life says the opposite. God was just as present in the slave quarters as he would later be in the palace. The Hebrew word for how Joseph did things here is tzalach, to prosper, to thrive, and the Bible uses it of a slave. So biblical prospering isn't mainly about your circumstances getting better. It's about God being with you and you staying faithful right in the middle of a situation you would never have chosen. If you're in a hard season and you've decided God has gone quiet or gone missing, I want to gently challenge that. The Lord was with Joseph in the pit of it. He's with you in the house you're trying to get out of. Now it gets harder. Potiphar trusts Joseph so much he puts him in charge of everything he owns. And Potiphar's wife notices Joseph and she pursues him, day after day. And one day there's no one else in the house, no witnesses, no way anyone would ever know. And Joseph says something I want you to really hear. Genesis 39, verse 9. How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God? Look at what he doesn't say. He doesn't say someone might find out. He doesn't say it's against the rules. He says this would be a sin against God, the one person who's always watching. Joseph had built an inner life where God was real even when nobody else was in the room. And here's the gut punch. He does the right thing and it costs him everything. She lies. She accuses him. And Joseph, who refused to do wrong when wrong was easy and free, gets thrown into prison for it. He gets punished for his integrity. There's a whole world of teaching out there right now about discipline and character and doing the hard right thing, and a lot of it is true and good. But most of it stops at you. Discipline yourself, build your willpower, become your best self. Joseph's integrity went deeper than self-discipline. He wasn't being good for an audience, and he wasn't even being good for a reward. Because there was no reward. Doing right is what put him in chains. He did right because God was real to him in private. And that's the kind of character that doesn't collapse the moment it stops being convenient. Real integrity is what you do in the empty room. It's who you are when there's no camera, no crowd, and no payoff. And sometimes when the payoff is actually a punishment. So now Joseph is in prison. And even there, Genesis says it again, the Lord was with him. He ends up running things the way he always does. And two prisoners arrive, Pharaoh's cupbearer and his baker. Both have dreams. Joseph interprets them. He tells the cupbearer, in 3 days you'll be restored to your position. And then he says something quietly desperate. Remember me. When it goes well for you, mention me to Pharaoh. Get me out of here. The cupbearer is restored, exactly as Joseph said. And then comes one of the saddest verses in the Bible, Genesis 40, verse 23. Yet the chief cupbearer did not remember Joseph, but forgot him. He forgot him? The one person who could have helped. Gone back to his comfortable life while Joseph stays in a cell. And the very next line tells you how long. 2 full years. I want to talk to whoever needs this because the forgotten season is its own specific kind of pain. It's not the drama of the betrayal. It's the slow ache of being overlooked, of doing good work nobody notices, of watching people you helped move on and forget you were ever there. Of feeling like life is happening to everyone else while you're stuck on pause in a room with no window. Here's what Joseph teaches you about that season. He didn't waste it. We don't get a single verse of Joseph becoming bitter, going passive, giving up. He kept serving. He kept showing up. He kept being faithful in a prison where faithfulness had so far gotten him nothing. There's a whole school of thought now that says your life is just the sum of your small repeated actions. That you don't change in one dramatic moment. You change by what you do over and over in the quiet. And that is exactly Joseph. His capacity to one day run a nation wasn't built the day he stood before Pharaoh. It was built rep by rep in obscurity in a prison with no audience and no applause. Joseph became useful long before he became visible. The forgotten years weren't empty, they were the training ground. Then suddenly the door opens. Pharaoh has a dream no one can explain. The cupbearer finally remembers. Joseph is rushed out of the dungeon, cleaned up, and brought before the most powerful man in the world. He interprets the dream, 7 years of plenty, then 7 years of famine, and lays out a plan to save the nation, and Pharaoh makes him second in command of all of Egypt. 13 years after the pit, he's 30 years old. Now here's the detail almost everyone skips, and it's the most meaningful one in the whole story. Joseph has two sons, and what he names them tells you exactly what was happening inside him. The first he names Manasseh, which sounds like the Hebrew for God has made me forget. Joseph says, God has made me forget all my hardship and all my father's house. And the second he names Ephraim, fruitful, because he says God has made me fruitful in the land of my affliction. Sit with that second name, fruitful in the land of my affliction, not fruitful after the affliction was over. Not fruitful once he escaped it, fruitful in it. The very place that was supposed to destroy him became the place he grew. And notice the order of the names, because this is a map for healing. First comes Manasseh. God helped him forget, not deny what happened, but release its grip so the pain stopped running his life. And only then comes Ephraim, the fruitfulness. You cannot become fruitful in your affliction while the affliction is still the thing controlling you. The forgetting has to come first. Not pretending it didn't happen, but laying down the right to let it define you. Joseph named the harm honestly. He didn't say Egypt was wonderful. He called it the land of my affliction. But he refused to let affliction be the last word over his life. And you can do that too. The thing that was meant to break you can become the very ground you grow in, but only once you stop letting it run the show. The famine comes just as Joseph said, and it drives his brothers, the ones who sold him, all the way to Egypt looking for food. And they bow down to the brother they betrayed, not even recognizing him. The dream from when he was 17 finally fulfilled. When Joseph finally reveals himself, he weeps so loudly the whole house hears it. And here's what he says to the terrified men who ruined his life. Genesis 45. Do not be distressed, for God sent me before you to preserve life. He's not excusing them. He's seeing something bigger than them. And then years later, after their father dies, the brothers panic, sure that now Joseph will finally take his revenge. And Joseph speaks the sentence this whole story has been walking toward. Genesis 50, verse 20. You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. Here's the detail in the original Hebrew that will change how you read your own life. The word translated intended both times is cheshav. It means to weave, to devise, to plan. And it's the same word for both. You wove evil against me. God wove the same threads into good. The brothers were at the loom weaving a story of betrayal and death. But theirs was not the only hand on the cloth. God was weaving the same dark threads. The pit, the slavery, the lies, the prison, the forgotten years, into something that would keep an entire region alive through a famine. Now there's a popular idea floating around that you are the author of your reality, that you manifest your life, that your thoughts and your belief bend the universe to your will. And Joseph's life is the loving correction to that. Joseph did not manifest his way out of that pit. He didn't visualize the throne. He couldn't see the famine coming. He couldn't engineer a single step of it. He simply stayed faithful inside a story he never would have chosen and trusted that there was a weaver he couldn't see. That message puts you on the throne of your reality. Joseph knew exactly who was on the throne, and it wasn't him. And honestly, that's better news, because it means the meaning of your story doesn't depend on your ability to control it. There is a hand on the loom that you cannot see. Let me guard this though, because this verse gets abused. This is not saying every betrayal leads to a promotion. It's not saying injustice is secretly good. Joseph never once calls the evil good. He calls it evil and says God overruled it. It's not saying that if you just stay positive, a palace is coming. And it is absolutely not saying that suffering proves God loves you, or that success proves you're more loved than the next person. This story doesn't spiritualize abuse. It doesn't tell you to be grateful for what broke you. It says something far stronger and far harder. That human evil does not get the final word when God is at work, even when you can't yet see how. So what do you actually do with Joseph this week? 6 things, one from each part of his life. First, name the harm honestly. Don't fake spiritualize it. Joseph wept. Joseph called Egypt the land of his affliction. You're allowed to say it hurt. Honesty comes before healing. Second, stop tying God's presence to good circumstances. The Lord was with Joseph in the prison. If you've decided God is absent because life is hard, challenge that this week. Third, do the right thing in the empty room. Find the one area where you act with integrity only when someone's watching and close that gap. Fourth, don't waste the forgotten season. If you're overlooked right now, build something quietly. Pick one skill that would make you more useful and put 30 minutes a day into it for the next 7 days. No announcement. Become useful before you become visible. Fifth, let the forgetting come before the fruitfulness. Is there a wound you're still letting run your life? Take one step this week to lay down its grip. And sixth, forgive without excusing. Name one person you need to release, not by pretending what they did was okay, but by refusing to let bitterness keep weaving your story. Joseph did both at once. So can you. Here's what I want you to carry out of this. Joseph could not control a single thing that happened to him. Not the pit, not the slavery, not the lies, not the forgotten years. The only thing he could control was the kind of man he became while he waited. And so when the door finally opened, 13 years late, there was a man on the other side of it ready to save a nation. You can't control when your door opens. You genuinely can't. But you can control whether there's someone ready when it does. So that's the question for this week. While no one is watching, while you're overlooked and forgotten and carrying something you didn't deserve, what are you becoming? Name the harm. Refuse the bitterness. Stay faithful in the dark. Because the same God who was with Joseph in the pit is weaving threads you cannot see, and what was meant to break you, he can make the very ground you grow in. You were forged in private long before you were ever seen. If this met you somewhere today, the full method is in the free starter workbook. Link in the description. Don't just nod at it. Pick one of those 6 steps and actually do it this week. And subscribe, because the next one, David, and the courage that gets built where nobody's watching, picks up right where this leaves off. I'll see you there.